Basil did this talk for, I believe it was the European meetup last year, which I attended and enjoyed thoroughly. So I'm excited for everyone to get to see it today. Psychological safety and how do we move the needle on that in our teams and in our organizations. And Basil has multiple years of experience in agile and agile consultancy and some very interesting businesses and startups. But has spent the last little while focusing in on leadership and psychological safety. So very interested to hear from him today and walk us through this. And for any VW fans out there, if you watched on our meetup.com page and saw his profile, he's living the camper van dream as well. So if you want anyone to talk to about that, Basil is your man. So with that, Basil, I'll hand to you. And, for those who would like to put questions in the chat throughout, we'll keep an eye on that. But it's a very back and forth conversational session. So you will have an opportunity to speak out loud as well. Basil, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, welcome everybody in whatever time zone you happen to be in. It's middle of the day for most of you, I think. So thanks for taking time out from your busy day for this. I'm going to go straight in and start sharing my slides just to give structure and to begin to sort of take you through the session. I've got, as Lauren says, I think my main sort of theme with this talk is really taking psychological safety from being a topic many of us now are probably quite familiar with. We may not have grappled with it in detail, but we're aware of it probably. It comes up in conversations here and there. And the real question I think that you and your clients are maybe thinking about is, well, what do we do about it? We know it's important. We know it can affect different aspects of work, but what can we do about it? So that's really the focus of today's talk. And just to orientate you a little bit on it, you're going to have to excuse me a little. I've been sort of delving and playing around with DALL-E version 3. So there's a lot of imagery, seeing the world for the first time, having an audience for the first time. So anyway, but just to orientate you on today's structure, I'm going to spend a bit of time just helping us establish a shared understanding. I've got a way of trying to bring into focus this otherwise potentially vague and unfocused topic of psychological safety. And hopefully that's something that you can share with others. I'm then going to look at moving the needle at 3 different levels. So personal level, at a team level, and then something that I've done a little bit of recently is at an organizational and at a divisional level. And then a discussion about what you might choose to do next around this. So my hope is that you would leave this session with some actual ideas about what you could try tomorrow or next week, or some of you even this afternoon, given what time zone you're in. So I think there's a number of sort of keeping it simple steps to moving the needle. And the first thing I want to talk to people about when it comes to psychological safety is noticing it. So I'll delve into each of these in a little bit more detail in a second, but noticing, I think, is the first step into safety. It's around us, but we need to attune ourselves to what it is, what it feels like, and when it's there and when it's not there. The next one is around sense making. How do we talk about it and share it and explore it and make it discussable as a topic rather than the sort of vague presence that we're all sort of living in? And the third part of this, I think, is experimenting. I'll come back to this theme again a little bit later, but this is probably one of the most complex areas. And for those of you with familiarity of complexity, we move forward with a real experimental attitude here. So I'll talk about all 3 of those now. The first part of noticing it, I think, is that we can talk about psychological safety as it's a thing. It's been studied now for 20 plus years. There's lots of academic sort of studies of it. There's lots of experiential reports in organizations, some of which I'll cover in a minute. So it really is something, it's something we can measure, something we can talk about, and something that matters. Um, I think also we experience it. We experience it in our bodies. We can sense it, and we can also begin to notice when it's there and when it suddenly disappears, because it is such a dynamic thing. You don't achieve a level of safety and then stay there. So I think it all begins with noticing. If you want to begin to move the needle on safety, this is where you would start. Having done the noticing, you're going to need some sort of sense making, some sort of ability to explore the topic. What is it we're talking about? What just happened? What might be affecting it? Is it about language or structure or inclusion or some other aspect of the workplace? So once we can begin to make sense of it, we can then, I think, move on to the third of the steps, which is experimenting. What can we begin to do? How could we nudge it? What could we learn about it? What techniques can we adopt and get better at? Because a lot of these techniques needed to move the needle are really quite nuanced and quite subtle. And they're not necessarily going to come easily to us as individuals or at a team level. We have to overcome some of our sort of our biases, some of our fears. I'll cover some of this a little bit later. But experimenting with safe to fail experiments frequently and just learning about the topic of psychological safety, I think, is the way that we move this forward. So as I said, one of the ideas I wanted for you is to have us today now, but also when you go and want to talk to other people about it, to have a shared understanding of what we mean by psychological safety. And I offer you this metaphor of bringing into focus what might be an otherwise quite a blurry image for people. So I've got three lenses that I'm going to sort of pull into focus here for you to help you see what this picture is. It's a picture I'm rather proud of because I took it last year on holiday, on a camper van holiday to the Lawrence, picking up on Lawrence Point. Um, but I'll give you a clue. It's the Baltic Sea. Anyway, I'll bring it into focus for you, one step at a time. The first lens I'm going to offer you is the academic lens. So we have primarily from Amy Edmondson, but going back to the 1960s with Edgar Schein and others, real rigorous, methodical, evidence-based study of psychological safety, how it affects people's ability to sort of work together, have a sense of belonging, their effectiveness in work, and this sort of thing. We don't have time today for me to go through this. I have some links at the end for those for whom the study that Amy did is new. I think she's got a couple of books out and she's the most gifted communicator. So very easy to get into if you haven't yet listened or read any of her work. The second lens I offer you is the commercial lens. So Amy brought it to life. She studied it in the medical area. It wasn't really, didn't have at that point huge commercial relevance, it seemed, until it was picked up by Google and Project Aristotle in 2014, 15, 16. And they set out to try and understand what is it that makes a team effective at Google. Again, many of you will know this story, so I won't go into it in detail, but having studied 120 teams over 3 years, looking at all sorts of different variables, they ran Amy's 7-question questionnaire survey, and they found that psychological safety was by far and away the most important factor determining the effectiveness of teams at Google. So I think this is what put it onto my radar back at an Agile conference in 2016 and onto a lot of other people's radar, including the New York Times and various other people. And the final lens I want to offer you is a personal lens. Each of us has been in the situation, possibly today, almost certainly in the last week, where we have noticed or had reason to notice either good or not so good psychological safety, where we might have held back. This might be in a work context, it might be in a home context or somewhere else, but where we have held back and haven't maybe shared or felt we could share our opinion or ask for help or show some vulnerability, or didn't feel included in the conversation and so on. So rather than just having this be a study of a sort of academic commercial thing, I do want to ground it in our own personal experience, because I think one of the reasons why we want to move and change psychological safety is for our personal experience of work and the personal experience of members of our team and others that we're around. So I've got a moment of reflection for you. There's no reason to, I'm not expecting to share this, but if you wanted to type anything into the chat, then please do. When was the last time you noticed yourself hesitate to share an idea, or some difficult news about a project or a piece of technology or a customer or a sale that didn't go quite right, and or to ask for help? What was it that affected your decision to not share and to hold back? And how did that feel?
We have
I'll
a
be
couple people
quiet.
that already, Basil. One person said today, and another person has said last week. In terms of the first question, when did you last notice?
Okay.
And Caroline has said, I would be seen as complaining and going against the grain, disruptor of sorts, I guess.
Right.
Mm.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm pretty rubbish at multitasking.
Don't worry, I'm on.
I won't play the the stereotypical boy thing, but it probably is related to me being a boy. Right. I've got the chat up, so thank you for that. How did it feel? Anyone have a sense of that? I'd be seen as complaining. Yeah. Helpless. Yeah. Thanks, Mandana. Okay, so I'll leave you with that reflection. I've got another calm image to share with you, so you can carry on reflecting. That's the next calm image. And the reason for sharing this image is that, as Amy Edmondson sort of likes to say, psychological safety isn't the goal. We don't, as lovely as it is to have it, we're not out there trying to create psychological safety for the sake of psychological safety. It's more that we're tending to the soil. We're hoping that things are going to grow in psychological safety. In that environment, we will see different dynamics, different behaviors, different achievements, and so on. I'm trying to avoid anchoring your thoughts on this one because I've got a question for you. And I'm hoping we can have a bit of a discussion. As Lauren says, the original plan was to have you drop into breakout rooms at this point, but we haven't got that. So we're going to have a discussion as a group. But I'll stop sharing in a second. But the question really for you is, what might grow if you had more psychological safety in your team? What might you see growing and developing if you had more safety? There's also a Mentimeter link here. I don't know if you're interested in sort of adding a little bit there. You can do. We can maybe collect things together. But seeing as we're all in one room, we could probably also do that in the chat and in the room. I'm going to turn you onto gallery so I can see you. So We've got creativity, transparency in solutions, innovation, experimentation. Feel free to add words to, I mean, add your voice to some of these words if you want to sort of expand on it a little bit more. Diverse perspectives. Mark's point about humility is a useful way into this, because I think part of, I mean, many of you are leaders, either formally or informally, of your teams. And part of making it safer for other people, I think, is for you as leaders to show your vulnerability and your humility and create that space for other people to offer help or to engage with you and feel safe to share the things that they don't know about, for example. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Uncovering blind spots, collaboration.
There's a lot here that are very related. You know, we have, for example, more of each person's contribution and diverse perspectives. Both of those kind of go together to enable some of these other ideas around, that's when we get innovation. That's when we can discover those blind spots. That's when we start to get the vulnerability, the daring to try new things, teams starting to gel around, this conversation around innovation. So I'm noticing a lot of almost like umbrella suggestions here that all the other things are fitting within. It's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not superficial team growth too. Yeah, it's not fake, very real. I like that comment too.
Yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about being real later, because there's a few myths to dispel about psychological safety. It's not about being nice to each other, for example. It is about having the difficult conversations that we sometimes need to be having. I'm also thinking of things like engagement, morale, resilience, belonging, a sense of sort of, belonging to a team, um, which comes under inclusion. And a little bit later, I'm going to be delving into sort of 4 elements of psychological safety, which speak to some of these points. But Mark's point about, learning and, that shows up in so many different ways. A team that's safe, that has a higher level of psychological safety, learns better, learns quicker, learns more effectively. And one of the ways it learns is through its attitude to failure. We're all in a complex environment. Failure is part of, the work we do, but do we learn from it? And now going back to the very roots of psychological safety, and Amy Evanson's study of the medical teams was the issue. Yes, very welcome to hear other voices than mine. And Lawrence, if anyone wants to share. Matthew, you're looking pensive. The
Yeah,
advantage of having people on screen, I can sort of pick up on
yeah.
that. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of gather some of the what's in the chat here, and one of the things I put was everyone's contribution. I think one of the effects of not having safety for me, and it sounds like for others, is not feeling like you're really using all of your ability to contribute to
Yeah,
the situation. And so, I think of it, so we have all these people in our teams who are talented, and yet only a certain percentage of what we're able to provide is available because people are shut down, different
yeah,
experiences with lack of safety. So
yeah, absolutely.
Just to dovetail on that, Matthew's point there, one of the things like reading through everything that everyone's saying, and thinking about my own experiences where I've kind of held back, kind of like your original prompt, Basil, is imagining all the talented people and what they're holding back and how much value that we are not realizing. It's almost like we're not deriving the value of the organization. I mean, especially when you aggregate that all together, it's like, wow, there must be a lot of thinking that is not going shared here.
Yeah. I mean, I think That Project Aristotle from Google, you know, goes to the heart of this, is that what made those teams more effective? It's exactly what you're saying, Matthew and Dan, about contribution, about having the real conversations. And, you know, it was far more important to the effectiveness of the teams than, you know, all sorts of other variables. So that is an intriguing finding, I think, but it speaks to this, to contribution. Absolutely.
I was thinking that one of the discoveries of the Aristotle project was that performance of teams don't lie in their backgrounds or in their roles, but it lies in the quality of the interactions.
Yeah.
And it's predictable as well for me, when there is psychological safety, this is predictable that this team will work and learn better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think what's quite interesting for those of us, I mean, just looking around, we've probably been in a few teams at work in our careers so far, and we can probably compare them. If you just go back through time, you know, there'll be those that felt more effective than others. And if you look at it through the lens of psychological safety, I would suggest it might explain to quite an extent the difference between the teams that you've been in, which were, you know, really effective and you love being in, and the teams that you were less love being in.
I'm thinking about what you said on your last slide as well, Basil, about, which is an aha moment for me. You know, it's not a goal or a destination. It's about feeding feeding the seed. It's the soil, it's the fertilization to help the seed of psychological safety grow. It's similar to culture, a kind of concept. And, you know, I think sometimes it's viewed as, well, taking the time to let everyone contribute. It's time consuming. We don't have time. We got to move fast. We got to move fast, without realizing that, you know, it's connected to that. Well, we go slow to go fast. We have to take the time up front to build that safety and fertilize it, and, you know, nurture the soil so that seed can grow continually throughout delivery. So we can get the speed, we can get all the other great benefits. So I really liked that. It gave me a real aha moment connected to that upfront stuff, particularly when new teams are forming. Yeah, I like your take on that.
Thanks, Laura. I'll have to give credit to Amy for that one, but it's my picture. Yeah. I think it is about the going fast bit. There's another part though around that sort of attitude to risk and failure, and people sharing concerns they might have that aren't fully formed in them yet. They don't yet have the evidence for something going wrong, but they sort of sense somewhere that something's going wrong. So that actually can make you go faster or safer. So that, I mean, that's why I like doing this talk within the sort of sooner, safer, happier framing, because, you know, it's like tick sooner, tick safer, tick happier, better value. Yep, I reckon at some points as well. So I think there's a strong synergy there. Anyone else got a thought that they're wanting to share, apart from Caroline, who's busy cooking? What are you cooking, Caroline? It's dinner time in the South. I think I know Caroline from about 10 years ago. Hi, Mark.
I have a question for the group and for you, Basil. Do you think the world is becoming more or less psychologically safe? And if so, why?
Well, later on, I'm going to bring it down to what Amy calls where this phenomena really works, is most relevant, which is a team level climate. So I think your question about the world in general is that I think it's getting less safe. I think it's getting more complex, and we are, leaving aside the political side of the world, but even just if we just talk about the working space, and how with my clients, I see teams forming and reforming and third parties getting involved and people coming in, joining and then leaving, you know, just at that level of churn is at another level, I think, than it has been even in the last sort of 10 years. So yeah, leaving aside all the political stuff, I think the workspace and the need to adapt. I mean, I'm sure most of us have been playing with AI recently, in different ways. what is that doing to the dynamics and the levels of trust within organizations and stuff. I can't help noticing you're at the Boston Children's Hospital. I'm wondering whether Amy studied your hospital in her original study, but
yeah, and she came and spoke at Boston Children's a couple months ago, and she
right.
was some.
What do you think of her?
Oh, I love what she has to say. I mean,
Yeah.
And obviously you've studied her. So just like, because I think what happens, so I'm just going to say, I think where we go wrong with psychological safety is where we don't tell the whole story as to, like, why we want to be psychologically safe. It's important, but it's not the ends. It's a means to an end, but it's also important. So I think that's where a lot of people struggle, even at Boston Children's. Like, when I hear leaders talking about it, they talk about the comfort part and leave out the second part a lot of the time.
Yeah. As I said, there's quite a lot of myth busting that sort of needs to go alongside with this. Not today, but if you were to go back and want to move the needle in your organization, I think having people be clear about what are we talking about is a good first step. And I'll come on to that in a few minutes as well. Thanks, Mark. Right. Well, thank you everybody for your thoughts there. And Caroline confirming that I know her from a while ago. So we've talked about psychological safety at a slightly higher scale, and now I want to delve down a level, and I'll come back to this framing of it again in a little while. But this comes out of the survey that Amy came up with, and what is now a tool that I've used with some organizations recently to get them really exploring psychological safety and how it's showing up at a team level. So we have these 4 elements of safety: attitude to risk and failure. We are in a complex world, things are going to change and fail, and how we respond to that is really a key characteristic of our levels of psychological safety that we have in our company. Amy, for those of you that follow her, has gone on to write a really good book about called The Right Kind of Wrong, which is all about failure and how to reframe it in different ways. And I encourage you to have a look at that if you want to sort of delve into this particular subject a little bit more. Also, inclusion and diversity, and really taking the time to reflect on the interactions, the meetings, the sessions that you currently participate in. I like the phrase that meetings aren't inclusive by default. Having a meeting and everyone dialing in as equals does not make it inclusive. We need to be thinking about other aspects of inclusivity. The one I've sort of looked at a little bit more recently is around neurodiversity. It's a subject I wasn't that sort of informed about a few years ago, and increasingly I am. But we can be changing the structure, the way we run meetings, online or face-to-face, to make them more inclusive, as well as on the diversity side, who do we have in the room, who do we invite to this session, and so on. Another element that we look at in that survey is willingness to help. How easy is it to help? How easy is it to ask for help? Do we have in place agreements and processes which make it easier to help? And are we using the different talents of people to mentor and to guide and bring on people sooner? And finally, the one about open conversation. So this is probably where well, I don't want to pick a favorite out of these 4, but open conversation and our ability to have those difficult conversations and overcome our collective human bias to getting on with each other. It's a topic that comes up in a number of places. In the 5 dysfunctions of teams, it's called artificial harmony. In Radical Candor, Kim Scott calls it ruinous empathy. But essentially, it's we're avoiding having the conversations we need to be having because we don't want to fall out with each other. We don't want to be excluded from this group and this team. So these play out differently in different cultures. And I'm thinking about sort of Dutch culture and how open that is versus, you know, the British culture and some others. But, you know, I think all of these are elements of psychological safety, and it's worth you thinking in this level of granularity if you're wanting to move the needle, because you can make interventions in each one of these 4 elements quite specifically, and it helps you to tune into, back to that noticing point, to tune into aspects of safety that are most relevant to you and your team at this moment. So we will come back to this a little bit later. I've got a couple more slides which build on these 4 elements. But before we do that, I just wanted to delve into the 3 levels that I mentioned right at the beginning. I'm going to spend a little bit of time, you know, at a personal level. What does that look like? Team, and then organization, and give you some ideas of what I've been doing and some of the other people have done around, you know, giving you practical tools and experiments to run with. So at the personal level, I think it's really a question of noticing and tuning in, and developing your confidence about how to intervene, what you can do, what options you have, and having psychological safety be something that you can work with. You know, not just something that you sit back and observe and measure, but something that you can move the needle on. And I think partly echoing Mark's point of earlier, I want to spend just a moment tapping into why, you know, understanding your personal why around safety. What is it about psychological safety to you personally that matters? So I'll come on to that in a moment. In terms of things you could do, I wanted to reveal this slide a little bit slowly to you because there's a lot on it, and I don't expect you to take it all away now, but I just wanted to illustrate for you 25 different techniques, little things you might be able to do. It comes from a book that I'll share with you in a second. But just to give you some sort of sense, you know, one of the topics is communicate courageously. What does that mean? It means, for example, as a leader saying, you don't know, you know, am I missing something? You know, I don't know what this is. You know, by exhibiting your vulnerability and your willingness to learn, your humility, you are communicating courageously because you're also making it easier for other people to communicate. So that's just one of the sets. I'll reveal the other ones just so that you know they're there. These will be in a PDF. I'm not quite sure how PDFs get sent out to people, or but the book itself is here. So 5 essential tools from the Psychological Safety Playbook came out last year, and it's a short book, but it's all about practicalities of what we can do as individuals to improve safety. And I've given you a link down at the bottom there. The connecting with my why bit, I think is important because I think for a number of reasons, I mean, you'll have your own language here, and you know, it's a very personal why. Obviously, I'm just illustrating what I mean by a personal why. You know, it's your experiences at work, maybe you as a leader, how you're developing and wanting to be as a leader going forwards. It may be that you want to take these skills outside of work back into the home or community or your next role and so on. But whatever it is for you personally, I think it's worth connecting to this why. And the main reason for that, I think, is that what I've noticed people doing when I share these ideas with them is that they sometimes struggle to prioritize the time to really go out there and experiment and develop their skills with these. I mean, I've just listed 25 different things you might want to try, but none of those are going to work for you until you've tried them and learned from them and experimented with them and so on. You're also going to need to tap into your personal why, because you're taking small risks, small little interpersonal risks. You know, if you were to raise some of these topics or just use different language in your team at the moment, you might feel that to be slightly risky. And so the more connected you are to your personal why do I want to be a better leader? Why do I want to improve safety? I'd suggest the more likely you are to prioritize and take those small risks. So that was level one, the personal level. Level two is at a team. And I think there's quite a lot you could do at a team level. I've sort of categorized them a little bit. The first one is just raise awareness. You know, a team that is able to talk about psychological safety and why it matters, and you know, sharing blogs and articles and things around it, is a team that's going to begin to notice when it's there and not there and be able to talk about it. So, you know, I think a lot of it can just start with, let's have a conversation. What is it? What is it not? And what do we want to do about it? You might get more specific and run a specific topic on neurodiversity. Most people that I've come across in most clients are aware of this, but they don't know what they would do to make it more inclusive of people. And then you can start to explore different types of neurodiversity and so on. And the final one is a workshop I'll share with you in a second, which is around making things discussable, or where are we on our discussability? I've got another reflection for you. Again, if you want to type things into the chat, feel free, but I'll just be quiet for a little while. So I think there's something about, we have sort of collective unspoken agreements that we're not going to talk about this or that and so on, and that has a real cost to the team. I won't do this one in detail because of time constraints, and I've got a blog post up above it, but essentially what we're talking about here is exercise in mural, where we put down a lot of topics along the top. We place them from a scale easy to discuss to difficult to discuss, and we listen to each other's conversations as we do this. This is a team exercise, obviously. We then vote about where do we think our team is on this scale. You know, are we up at this end, able to discuss some of these difficult topics over here? Or are we down at this end, you know, unable to talk about these ones? So it just tunes people into the idea that there might be a scale, and you can do this all anonymously, so you know, have it be a safe workshop. But I'd suggest quite a fun workshop as well, easy to facilitate, and goes to the heart of the topic about discussability. So there's a link in there to a LinkedIn.
I asked you actually the bullet on the last slide around neurodiversity and running a session on that. Have teams acknowledge where, and I was thinking, well, if there's not psychological safety, you know, teams might not feel safe to say, I am neurodiverse and here's what I contend with, and how we can try and complete that in the team. And then you answered my question by saying, hey, here's a way to talk about whether we're ready to talk about that or not. It's great. I've never had an opportunity to run this, but I remember this workshop now that I'm seeing it again from your session in Europe. And I hope I get the opportunity to do this, because it's a really great way to find out where psychological safety is at in the team and what can we talk about right now, particularly if we're a brand new team. So this is an awesome tool.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if you do and you like it, tell me how it went, and I'll be interested to hear some experiences. The final level is organizational level, and this is from personal experience. I've run this particular intervention with several clients now, up to about 300 people at a time sometimes. One is this is actually a scan that uses Amy Edmondson's original questions, compares it to thousands of other teams that have also used it, so you get to sort of see where is my team versus other teams. It uses those 4 elements that we've just gone through: attitude to risk and failure, open conversations, and so on. There's a briefing that takes about an hour, which just takes people through what is psychological safety. Then they answer the questionnaire. Then we have team workshops. And the important thing here is we're not talking about psychological safety at an organizational level, because to me, and more importantly to Amy, that has limited value. What you find, going back to the hospitals that she studied, was some teams had high levels of safety and other teams didn't. So I think, even though I'm talking about this as an organization one, the benefits I think of this is that you can move, a lot of people quite quickly into talking about it and it becoming a topic. So you can sort of get to critical mass quite quickly. And then for those people that are particularly keen on it, I've run what I call a cultivating psych safety program. So basically, it's 5 one-hour sessions 2 weeks apart, and we practice some of the experiments as we go between the sessions, and then we reflect on what we've learned. So those are the 3 tiers that I mentioned in terms of moving the needle: personal, team, and organization. I'm going to share this now, but we probably don't have time to talk about it in a huge detail, but hopefully you'll get the slides, or you can take a screenshot of it. The point here is that in each one of these dimensions or elements of psychological safety, there are questions we can be asking each other, or sessions we can be doing, or things we can be reflecting on as an individual leader or as a team, which point to one or other of these elements. So again, I think this is probably the level for you to work at. Working at the level above, which is psychological safety, I think is difficult to key into. It's difficult to, really connect with it. So if you want to get traction, I'd suggest this is the level of granularity for you. So I wanted to just finish with another bit of a discussion. I'll post the questions up here, and just say, of those elements, I'll tell you what, I'll put them into let me just go back, and I'll put them into the chat so that you've got a screenshot of them in the chat just to reference. Otherwise, you're not going to really be able to. So I've posted that into chat, and the question is there. I shall get that into chat as well, just so you don't have to remember it. And I shall stop sharing and hear what you think. So think of this as sort of the end of the session. We've got 10 minutes left, and I wanted it to be more of a discussion, exploring time for us. So what thoughts do you have?